Hello, 7th graders, it's Mr. Carroll here. Today we're going to be talking about the idea of humanism. So, humanism is a way of kind of thinking about and understanding the world. All right, it's a way of organizing your thoughts about it. It has its basis in Greek and Roman texts, so people understand the world by reading Latin and Greek and kind of understanding who the Romans and who the Greeks were. At its foundation, it's belief in the worth of the individual, and that reason is a path to knowledge. Okay, so we can see this as a Renaissance philosophy. It encouraged civic pride, and it encouraged the development of a person's skills. All right, that they had to improve themselves through education. It's kind of a false belief, though, that it's in opposition to the church. It really works hand in hand with the church. All right. A lot of positivists kind of want to make it, which is the belief that the world is always progressing in an upward kind of fashion. A lot of them would like to make you believe that the church is dumb and that the church is the Dark Ages and that the church was bad and that humanism is the start of the education and that humanism is the start of moving away from the church. But that's not the case. A lot of humanists were also church leaders or were heavily involved in the church. St. Thomas Aquinas is one of them that we've talked about at school, and there are many more. So it's false to believe that it's church versus humanism. The two groups are really pushed and connected together. Francesco Petrarch, better known as Petrarch in English, is considered the father of humanism. He lived in Arezzo. He was born in Arezzo, Italy, and he moved all around Italy, to Venice, to Milan. He moved to France at one point. He actually was connected to the Pope and worked with the Pope. He lived from 1304 to 1374, and he's one of those people that when you start to look at his life, he is deeply connected with the church still. And so humanism is not, separate or in opposition to the church, but it works together with it. And both needed to exist for us to kind of move through and understand the world a bit better. Petrarch was known for traveling to different monasteries looking for Latin and Greek texts. In 1345, he was lucky and found a group of letters written by the Roman Cicero. And he ends up writing letters in response to Cicero's letters. And we're going to look at some of those later on in the slideshow. So who is this Cicero? So his name is Marcus Tullius Cicero. He was born, he lived from 106 to 43 BCE. He lived most of his life in Rome, Italy, but he traveled around the Mediterranean as well. And he's a prolific Latin writer. The Latin that I teach in Latin class is based largely on the text of Cicero, and it comes from a history of learning how to read Latin so you can read Cicero. He is listed by the church as a righteous pagan. Saint Augustine quotes Cicero. Petrarch has these conversations with him, and so he's seen as this righteous pagan who, if he had just lived a little bit later in life, would have obviously been, a member of the church, at least in the people's mindset, in the saints' mindset. So that's why they label him as that righteous pagan. He wrote a lot. So he wrote 88 speeches, from political to courtroom speeches, and 52 of them survived. That's a really good rate of survival. We know he had 11 books on politics. He had 16 books on philosophy, and these survive in they survive in complete works or sometimes in fragments. And he wrote 72 books of letters, 37 of which survive. And these are the letters that Petrarch found and started to read and then respond to. and it's what this idea of writing and publishing letters is what we're going to get into now, because I'm sure you're thinking, letters, aren't those the things that you send to relatives and to friends, kind of letting them know how you're doing and what's going on? It's it's like the postcard you send during a vacation. Well, that is one type of letter writing, but letter writing is kind of a whole genre of literature. They're called epistles. We see them a ton in the Bible. St. Paul was a prolific writer in the Bible, and so we have a bunch of letters in there in the Bible, but that's not the only one. Cicero was a letter writer. Pliny the Younger was a letter writer. Seneca, who was a philosopher under the Emperor Nero, wrote letters. Romans wrote letters all the time. Greeks wrote letters all the time. And then Petrarch started a whole new batch of this style or genre in the 1300s, at the beginning of the Renaissance. The letters are often didactic, which means they're there to teach as well as entertain. They're polished and well thought out. So they're not just like, hope you're doing well, I saw this today, I'm going here tomorrow. It's really like, it's a well thought out kind of argument. And this style of writing is taught in schools, both in Roman schools as well as medieval Renaissance schools. And it's important for teaching and communicating as the roads start to fail. So as the Roman road system starts to not be as well maintained during the medieval and then the Renaissance period, it's important that not everyone can travel, and so you need to send a letter to someone with a whole description of what you want them to do or what you want them to learn, because it's easier to send a bunch of those across the world than to go yourself. So we're going to read two letters. This first one is from Cicero, and then the next one is from Petrarch. So it reads, this one happens to be to Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, so Pompey the Great, who's in Rome in 62 BC. So M. Tullius Cicero, son of Marcus, greets Gnaeus Pompeius, son of Gnaeus, Imperator, or general. If you and the army are well, I shall be glad. From your official dispatch I have, in common with everyone else, received the liveliest satisfaction, for you have given us that strong hope of peace, of which in sole reliance on you I was assuring everyone. But I must inform you that your old enemies, now posing as your friends, have received a stunning blow by this dispatch, and, being disappointed in the high hopes that they were entertaining, are thoroughly depressed. Though your private letter to me contained a somewhat slight expression of your affection, yet I can assure you it gave me pleasure, for there is nothing in which I habitually find greater satisfaction than in the consciousness of serving my friends. And if on any occasion I do not meet with an adequate return, I am not at all sorry to have the balance of kindness in my favor. Of this I feel no doubt, even if my extraordinary zeal on your behalf has failed to unite you to me, that the interest of the state will certainly effect a mutual attachment and coalition between us. To let you know, however, what I missed in your letter, I will write with the candor which my own disposition and our common friendship demand. I did expect some congratulation in your letter on my achievement for the sake at once of the ties between us and the Republic. This I presume to have been omitted by you from a fear of hurting anyone's feelings. But let me tell you that what I did for the salvation of the country is approved by the judgment and testimony of the whole world. You are a much greater man than Africanus, but I am not much inferior to Laelius either. And when you come home, you will recognize that I have acted with such prudence and spirit that you will now not be ashamed of being coupled with me in politics as well as in private friendship. So Cicero obviously got an official dispatch from Pompey the Great, where he talked about his own where Pompey the Great talked about his own achievements. And Cicero is kind of acting like I know you couldn't say like you're my best friend in those official dispatches, but I understood it because we're going to be good friends. Right? Cicero kind of comes off as a little desperate here in this letter, right? He wants to be tied with Pompey the Great. And just recently, Cicero had also put down a potential coup of the Roman government. And that's what he's talking about at the end. He's like, I saved the republic, and you, in your army, have saved the provinces, and we together need to be friends and work for the betterment of the Roman people. All right? He's kind of sounding a little desperate here, right? Asking that he should be friends with Pompey, and that, I'm going to write with candor about it, and I expect that we are going to have ties together, and, you were probably just trying to save other people's feelings, but I know what you were trying to say. All right, so that's what we're kind of piecing together with the reading of Cicero's letter to Pompey. All right, and this is not the only example of this. Cicero wrote letters to his daughter, he wrote letters to his best friend, but this is just one example of letter writing to another Roman general. So here we have Petrarch's letter to Marcus Tullius Cicero. Your letters I sought for long and diligently, and finally, where I least expected it, I found them. At once I read them over and over with the utmost eagerness, and as I read, I seemed to hear your bodily voice, O Marcus Tullius, saying many things, uttering many lamentations, ranging through many phrases of thought and feeling. I long had known how excellent a guide you have proved for others. At last I was to learn what sort of guidance you gave yourself. Now it is your turn to be the listener. Hearken wherever you are to the words of advice, or rather of sorrow and regret that fall, not unaccompanied by tears, from the lips of one of your successors, whom loves you faithfully and cherishes your name, O spirit ever restless and perturbed in old age. I am but using your own words, self-involved in calamities and ruin. What good could you think would come from your incessant wrangling, from all this wasteful strife and enmity? Where were the peace and quiet that befitted your years, your profession, your station in life? What will-o'-the-wisp tempted you away with delusive hope of glory, involved you in declining years in the wars of younger men, and after exposing you to every form of misfortune, hurled you down to a death that was unseemly for a philosopher to die? Alas, the wise counsel that you gave your brother in the salutary advice of your great masters you forgot. You were like a traveler in the night, whose torch light up for others the path where he himself has miserably fallen. O Dionysius, I forbear to speak of your brother and nephew too, of Dolabella even, if you like. At one moment you praise them all to the skies, at the next fall upon them with sudden maledictions. This, however, could perhaps be pardoned. I will pass by Julius Caesar, too, whose well-approved clemency was a harbor of refuge for the very men who were warring against him. Great Pompey likewise I refrain from mentioning. His affection for you was such that you could do with him what you would. But what instantly led you to hurl yourself upon Antony? Love of the Republic, you would probably say, but the Republic had fallen before this in irretrievable ruin, as you had yourself admitted. Still, it is possible that a lofty sense of duty and a love of liberty constrained you to do as you did, hopeless though the effort was. That we can easily believe of so great a man. But why, then, were you so friendly with Augustus? What answer can you give to Brutus? If you accept Octavius, said he, we must conclude that you are not so anxious to be rid of all tyrants as to find a tyrant who will be well disposed toward yourself. Now, unhappy man, you were to take the last false step, the last most deplorable. You began to speak ill of the very friend whom you had so lauded, although he was not doing any ill to you, but merely refusing to prevent others who were, I grieve, dear friend, as such fickleness. These shortcomings fill me with pity and shame. Like Brutus, I feel no confidence in the arts in which you are so proficient. What, pray, does it profit a man to teach others and to be prating away always about virtue in high-sounding words, if he fails to give heed to his own instructions? Ah, how much better it would have been, how much more fitting for a philosopher to have grown old peacefully in the country, meditating, as you yourself have somewhere said, upon the life that endures forever and not upon this fragment of life, To have known no fasces, yearned for no triumphs, found no Catalines to fill the soul with ambitious longings. All this, however, is in vain. Farewell forever, my Cicero. Written in the land of the living, on the right bank in the Adige, in Verona, a city of Transpadine Italy, on the 16th of June, in the year of that god whom you never knew, the 1345th. So Petrarch here is kind of summarizing the end of Cicero's life, and he mentions a lot of people that were involved in the civil wars at the end of the Roman Republic, such as Dolabella, Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, Antony, Octavian, and how his meddling in politics and really, really yelling at Antony that he was not fit to be a leader caused his own death. Agents of Antony went out and sought and killed Cicero during this upheaval in the civil war. And Petrarch had just wished that Cicero heeded his own advice and gone into the countryside to be a philosopher. Because Petrarch has probably at this point read about the history of Rome in a couple of in sources like Livy and Dionysius of Halicarnassus and all these other historians who talk about how great a philosopher Cicero was, and he was like, I wish you wrote more philosophy. And so you can see that he's sad for the passing of Cicero and wishes that he had done differently. Okay, but you can see he's kind of also modeling himself after Cicero, where he does things like he mentions names and he mentions a brief snippet of them, but then he doesn't talk about them. Cicero did that when he mentioned Scipio. Here, Petrarch does that when he mentions Julius Caesar, kind of giving a nod that any person who's actually reading this should know who exactly Julius Caesar is, or who Scipio, the general who conquered Carthage, really is. They also are very direct in what they want. He's like, Cicero in his letter to Pompey is like, I want to be friends with you. We're going to save the Republic. Petrarch with his letter is like, I wish you had just kept your nose out of politics or got out of politics and left it for the younger men and wrote more philosophy because I want to read your philosophy. So you can see kind of how there's some parallels here. All right. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below in the comment section. And I will see you again in the next video where we talk about how to model our own letters in this style. Thanks for watching and stay healthy.